Okay, hi folks, my name is Mel Babik, Kittitas Conservation Trust. And today I'm going to talk to you about Hutchinson Ranch River Assessment and Design. And I have the project number 251179. This property is 235 acres. We just recently closed on this. This was a surfboard application in 2022. So it's previous surfboard investment. And 235 acres, it's in YRA 39 in the Thorpe Reach of the Yakima River. And if you can see Highway 10 here on the northern side of the highway, it's right across from the popcorn wall. If you guys are familiar with that white wall on the north side of Highway 10, the property is right across the road from that.
Very cool.
Well, I like popcorn, so it's awesome. It's called Popcorn Wall. Put it on a map.
From here on, it is.
Okay, some limiting factors for Yakima River fish. As we all know, the Yakima River has been straightened and channelized for decades upon decades. On this property in particular, we have a half-a-mile levee. That's that red line you can see there. That's virtually disconnected the floodplain from the Yakima River. We have very little shallow water refuge for our teeny tiny little fish. And in the summertime, you all know irrigation flows are quite high. So it's a real limiting factor for our juvenile fish. We have a lot of removal of riparian vegetation, especially in this reach. Mid-Columbia Fisheries did a study a couple years ago, their cottonwood assessment, and they found that 86% of our floodplain forest in the Kittitas Reach has been removed. And you'll see that on this property as well. Not a very healthy riparian stand, which leads to elevated water temperatures. All life stages of our coho, chinook, and our native trout species utilize this area, as well as adult and juvenile steelhead, and bull trout use it for their FMO habitat. We also have things like lamprey, and I'm told, I have no personal knowledge of this, but I'm told we have pearl shell mussels, a little bed right outside this property as well. So it's a pretty cool area. Also, we got these dots, these spring chinook reds. Those are those yellow dots you'll see on the map. I got those from Scott Downs a few years ago. So we know it's an important area for our spring chinook reds. Current conditions, if all of you online, you'll see these red lines up and down. That's our levee. It was historically used. It was the first Ellensburg concrete production site. The family owned the property. So way back when they first started Ellensburg Concrete, they started on this property. So you'll see a lot of push up debris, some spoils. You'll see some old pits from explorations. And then you see this levee. They wanted to remove the river from its floodplain for agricultural, for resource extraction needs. And we have a real legacy of that. So the levee, I don't know, it's about 8 feet tall. It's pretty significant. You can see the bottom right-hand side of this photo, a lack of riparian vegetation. And then the bottom left-hand side of this photo, you see these old, what are they? Kind of metal grates that they, I'm told, used to land aircraft on back in the war days. So those are all over the property and they're holding down the banks from erosion. But we have a lot of hope and potential for this property. That's why it was conserved as recently as December. We have relative elevation models, some mapping and LiDAR that shows these historic side channels. So there's a lot of potential that we could reconnect these areas for, again, those little juvenile fish that need refuge in the summertime. Our limiting factors here on the LiDAR map on the left, you can see there's 2 white houses. The one on the north side is my pointer's not working, but it is the Airbnb. And then the one down on the southern side is just a residential. There's a bunch of houses there. But that's kind of our limiting factor, which is why we didn't go straight to restoration design and full permitting. We really wanted to work with these landowners. They've been super supportive of our project. They're all jazzed that the area is conserved because they utilize this property for recreation. But we want to make sure whatever floodplain connections we do not impact their residential infrastructure. So we're going to work closely with them as part of our tags. But even with that, I see real potential to do some good on this property. It's also really cool for wetland habitat. We know this isn't, we're talking more about fish, but I couldn't miss an opportunity to share some of the cool wetland features on this property. On the north side, we have this really neat open area that has a lot of sedges and rushes. The more deer I have ever seen in Kittitas County belong on this property. You can't walk without stepping in deer feces. On the southern side, we have kind of an ephemeral stream that runs through there. I'm told in high flows. I haven't personally seen it because we haven't owned the property long enough, But the landowners adjacent said that the stream does run, and we can see there's little pools left. A lot of cool wildlife in this area as well. And then there's a really cool pond, an old gravel borrow pit, but we should talk about that. It's a really cool diverse pond. We have painted turtles. There's some fish in there. It's just a really cool little wetland habitat. There we go. And 4 recovery plans support this project. We have the National Marine Fisheries Service Steelhead Plan. Of course, we have the Yakima Steelhead Recovery Plan, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Full Trout Implementation Plan, and the Yakima Full Trout Action Plan that was updated in 2017. These all talk about restoring riparian areas that will lead to enhanced water quality. They'll lead to improved large weed debris recruitment. We want to restore these natural processes on the property to reconnect the floodplains and reduce the confinement in the Yakima River. So all these plans are hopefully what we'll get with this assessment. There's a lot more support for this project. As I mentioned, it was recently conserved with surfboard funding partially. We also have McNary funds as well as a little other funding from other sources. But the project number is 22-1246. If y'all want to look it up, why it was conserved. We mentioned that the next step would be an assessment and restoration efforts in the future. So here we are, only 4 months after we closed, asking for that very thing. We also have Yakima Basin Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board. It's tagged focus project number 21 with that reconnection of floodplain and side channel connections. And then, of course, we have the Reaches project that talked about this Kittitas Reach and how important it was to restore natural processes to improve riparian forest. And then finally, the Mid-Columbia Fisheries Cottonwood Assessment I already mentioned, but it listed this project site as a #1 priority for restoration in their assessment. So the goals of this project, we want to improve in-stream floodplain and riparian function and increase the amount of fully functioning riparian habitat, and then increase the quantity and quality of off-channel habitat. How we're going to do that, we basically have 4 objectives. One is perform a site assessment and a preliminary analysis. Number 2, we're going to develop 3 alternative restoration analyses and look at the feasibility of each of those. Things like, could we set back the levee? Could we rehydrate those side channels? Could we do any LWD placements or have possibly some riparian plantings? After we get one of those restoration alternatives, the tag and CAG, so it's really important, we'll develop that into a 15 to 30% restoration design set. And then our last objective, we want to develop a riparian enhancement plan for this property. You can see the bottom photo shows out of 235 acres, 71 acres are in ag production. And we'll keep that in ag production for the next several years because we don't really have a plan for that yet. And without supporting this ag, it'll suppress the weeds. If we take that off immediately, we'll just have a field of weeds to deal with. So we need a plan before we remove that ag. We also, as you saw in the pictures earlier, we want more stream shading. So the scope of work, our task 1, how we're going to do our site assessment analysis, possibly might involve some groundwater wells to see how the hydrology is connected on this property already. We might do some hydraulic analysis and getting an existing conditions model complete with topo bathymetry and LiDAR. Our deliverable would be a technical memo for that task. Task 2, those 3 conceptual alternative designs and feasibility of each one of those, we'll work with our tag and CAG to come up with a memo at the end of that work. And task 3, building out that one design set to the 15 or 30%. We'll of course have cost estimates, a preliminary design set, and a proposed hydraulic condition model. And the deliverable, that would be a basis of design report. Task 4, of course, we all have project management, we put in everything. And task 5 was that riparian enhancement plan I already mentioned before. Our budget's about $280,000. The big ticket items here are the assessments of the property, gathering all of that data. And then the second big ticket item would be our conceptual preliminary designs. That's like $71,000. And these numbers, we used other projects that we had done in the past with inflation, of course, and we reached out to our contractor to see if we were about spot on. And that's how we came up with our cost estimates. This project has a lot of community benefits, especially in the face of climate change. I live in Thorpe, just outside of Thorpe. And up until 2021, you can see kind of the road that goes northwest to southeast. That's the railroad that goes through that property. And up to 2021, that was always seen as a barrier to flooding of the community. So nobody in Thorpe had flood insurance. 2021, that all changed. FEMA redid their maps. And you can see now it's all blue, which is a 1% annual chance of flooding. So the railroad is no longer considered a flood barrier. So we're really hoping this property, sorry, you can't see online, but the property's right here. We're really hoping that if we can open this up, it would reduce the flood impacts to the local community of Thorpe, my neighbors. We also want to have recharging groundwater aquifers and providing a more resilient, natural, robust habitat in the face of climate change. So we're thinking there could be a real benefit if we're able to engage the floodplain for Thorpe. This is also a really important site for Yakima Nation. They've contacted us because they think there's a lot of really cool features, a lot of cool sites on this property. It's of course within their ceded territory, but it's less than a mile downstream from their largest Yakima Nation village in Kittitas Valley. If anybody knows how to say that word properly, I would love to hear the pronunciation. I won't butcher it. But it is a really cool site for them to restore their treaty trust resources. And with that, here are some partners. Again, McNary Mitigation Fund, as well as RCO Integrated Plan, all help support the conservation of these 235 acres. WFW, Yakima Nation, and the county are super supportive of reducing the buffering the flood events from Thorpe, as well as improving fish and wildlife habitat and making our floodplains more resilient with climate change. And then the Thorpe landowners, our neighbors on all sides have been pretty supportive and are really excited about what kind of restoration that this project might occur. Any questions?
Thank you, Mel.
The agricultural, the hay, the water rights and things like that.
No, we don't have water rights. We just goes back into the ditch. So once we return, the water rights didn't come with it, but once we return our irrigation, we pay an assessment. So once we're no longer using it, somebody else will use it.
Which district is it?
I should know that. I want to say Cascade, but I could be wrong. Is it Cascade?
No, I guess.
We had like 32 shares that came with it. But
What's that?
we had like 32 shares of, I think, Cascade. Like,
We could get back to you on.
Yeah, well, it's no big deal. I'm, farming interest. So what I was thinking is you guys could grow trees.
Yeah.
In that field.
Yeah.
Use those trees, they can plant them all over the place.
Yeah, and that's why I want to see what the soils and the hydrology is, because I look at this field not so much down that far away from the river as riparian habitat, but more like an upland oak savanna is what I'm seeing, but I don't know, I could be wrong. It could be wetter than that, and it would be
Yeah.
conducive for cottonwoods.
Just note in those shares, you should figure out their possible futures. For many of the districts, shares are transferable and have cash value.
Yes,
And it's definitely something you don't want to just let slide away.
no, that's what we were told. So whenever we are not farming this anymore. Yeah. Good question, Jay, and you should get a machine.
Anybody that's got water, let's use it.
You were saying?
Oh, Jay, you should see the machinery left there. We'll do a tour. There's some old cool stuff you'll get.
Oh, yeah, I've been hearing about it. I'm anxious to see it.
Sweet.
Can you tell us a bit more about the nation's interest in this land that's off their reservation?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was really close to that historic village site, and they just have reason to believe that it was a strong cultural area, that there could be sites that are interest to them. So we gave Noah Oliver the site map. Access is a little tricky because you have to go up a private road, but we told him we can get him on and he can look around and dig up some old history of.
So they're in
whatever they-
favor of this project because you'll give them more access to it than they used to have?
Oh, well, not really. The only access on this property is either from adjacent lands or on the river.
Mhm.
But they're part of our board, they supported the acquisition of this. They make up a third of KCT's board. So they're very supportive of the acquisition and they do have access, but it's just a little tricky. You can't just drive up to it. You have to find another way on, but we can get people on the property with advance notice.
And so what they like about this project is
Well, if it wasn't for conservation, I guess taking a step back, if it wasn't for this property to be conserved, it would more than likely be developed.
Okay.
Because it's Kittitas County, a lot of areas are being developed. Bristol Flats is kind of the next on the list, but we saw Springwood recently conserved, which is just upstream of it. So they were really a proponent of preserving that for their cultural resources. But this would be protected. They want to make sure our restoration is not going through any sites, which of course we do culturals. So I have 20,000 in there to make sure the culturals, whatever we're doing, is being consistent with cultural resources consultation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Question.
Does the upstream landowner already have like flood protection stuff? Does it seem like to be in the bend of the river? And they have like a berm upstream of their place?
The Levitts,
Yeah, the most upstream.
yeah, they're really adjacent. They kind of, the property's a little wonky. I don't even have them on this map. At some point, they even buffer us from the river. They don't have a berm or anything on their side. But it does sound like they're losing some bank because they're really interested in riparian planting.
Anybody online? Anybody have anything they'd like to hear more about, see on our site tour?
Painted turtles. You all want to see the painted turtles, I'm sure.
David? What's your, I'm sorry again, what's the plan with the levy and stuff?
Well, we want to do an assessment to see if we can set that back or remove it. That's the goal. We didn't go straight to a restoration design and permitting because we have those adjacent landowners. But it'd be super great if we could remove that levy, allow the Yakima River to re-engage with this whole property and re-engage those relic side channels that used to be there.
You said it's 8 feet high.
Roughly in places, yeah, it's well over me.
That require a lot of. Would that require like excavation?
It could, or breaching holes in it perhaps, just to reconnect those side channels that were already there and on the landscape. Perhaps it's just punching some holes in. Yeah, we'll go through these, 3 alternatives, probably a lesser approach, middle of the road, and then a more aggressive to see biggest bang for the buck. I imagine that's what you're thinking. What's the cost of that?
So curiosity, the ag that's currently there, are you leasing to somebody or how does that? Okay.
Yeah, we're working, so we purchased it from a family, the Hutchinson, and the nephew farmed it before. He had a lease with his aunt. And so we're keeping his same lease going with really similar conditions. He already has it planted in alfalfa. All the infrastructure belongs to us, so we can sell it whenever we're completely done with the ag, but he's gonna be our lessee. So we pay the taxes, the irrigation assessments, the infrastructure.
I missed this earlier. Jen said this property is served by West Side Irrigation Company.
Thank you, Jen. She's the best.
If nobody has any other questions, anything you expected us to ask that we didn't?
So I guess we're pretty easy. I can't wait for you to see. I hope we get to go out to the site. I really want to show you guys. It's a really cool property.
You say hope to, why would we?
In case you're too busy and I have to do
Oh,
a presentation.
I
You
see.
have too many cool places to see.
We do have quite a few projects, but optimistic. Yeah,
This is a pretty accessible one.
It's easy to
Yeah.
get at.
yeah.
And Thorpe's a hopping in place. Who wouldn't want to come to Thorpe?
Okay,